And up first, we have reports. 5.01, Pay to Participate. Mr. Scott Reeves is going to speak with us first.
Thank you, President Davidson, Dr. Kellogg, members of the board. As requested, the last board meeting, we kind of gave a state of where we were with our extracurricular programs and an overview of our fee structure, and we were asked to come back with some options and recommendations moving forward with that fee structure. So that's what we have tonight, and our goal tonight is to provide you with those options for you to consider that reduce the family share of financially supporting our extra and co-curricular supplemental contracts. And so, in looking at the different type of fees that we have, one of them being the club fees, and we currently collect a $15 fee for 33 different secondary clubs. That's not all of the clubs that we offer or all of the clubs that we have a supplemental contract for. And currently, as of last year, having the last full year, we've generated approximately $18,100 in revenue. Some of those clubs, for example, the ones that we do collect for, ski club, yearbook, drama club, key club, photography club, fishing club. Those are examples of clubs we do collect a $15 fee for. The example of clubs we don't, or more academic based, National Honor Society, Student Council, Career Day, Renaissance. And so our recommendation would be to suspend the club fee effective the 16-17 or next school year, because at this point, and you'll see this as a common theme in some of our recommendations, some of our students have already paid their club fee for this year. And so phasing this out for the next school year, 16 and 17, and just a highlight note, prior to 2012 and our levy failure, we did not charge a pay-to-participation fee in this category. With our co-curricular fees, our recommendation, we recommend suspending the $50 fee beginning again in 16-17 for co-curricular activities where students actually earn a grade. And those would be marching band, orchestra, jazz band, and our choirs. As of last year, that generates approximately $30,000 and would result in a $30,000 reduction in revenue. But a note that I want to mention that I did not highlight in the last presentation is that we do offer financial support K-12 to our music programs. And annually, a 3-year average, we support our music programs approximately $70,000 a year, and that out of the general fund. And that $70,000 takes care of supplies, takes care of music, sheet music, instrument repairs, instrument replacement, and those type of things. And that's a 3-year average. Recorders for elementary school. So we do provide pretty significant support for our K-12 music programs. And again, like the other category, prior to 2012, we did not charge a pay-to-participation fee in this category. So our theater programs, which is our other co-curricular, our recommendation is to assess a one-time $50 fee in this school year, 2015-2016, which would cover all performances, and phase that out to recommending suspending the $50 fee completely in 2016 and 2017 for theater performances, which generates, depending on the performance and the amount of cast you need, about $5,400 would be the reduction. The reason that we are phasing that out is because we already had our fall performances where students have already paid the $50 fee. Our recommendation is for students who participated in the fall performance, they could participate in future performances without having to replicate that $50 fee. If we come around to the winter performances or the spring musicals and they haven't performed in a previous performance this year, then they would pay the one-time $50 fee as we phase out, and then phase it completely out next year would be our recommendation. So as far as our athletic fees, one of the things that we wanted to do was do a quick comparison of how our district stood with the other 19 OCC districts that represent 32 schools. So of the 19 OCC school districts, 17 of them do have a pay-to-participation fee with an average of $170 per sport for high school and $120 a sport for middle school. The high being New Albany at $625 for high school and $425 for middle school with no cap. the low being Delaware with 35 for high school and 25, but most fall right in that $150 to $200 range. The two school districts that do not have a pay-to-participation fee are Groveport and Newark. 8 of the 17 districts either have some kind of cap for families or for individuals in sports, a consideration for qualifying economically disadvantaged families, and or a reduction model for students that pay for multiple sports. So that's how we kind of compare with that. So looking at different models to consider, one of the models to consider would be to maintain our current model. And our current model is a $240 fee per sport at the high school, $120 per sport at the middle school. Last school year, that generated $584,000 for all 7 schools, all 3 seasons. If that model is maintained, we would also recommend placing upon that a family cap of $500 effective the winter season upon us, winter 2015, not retroactive beyond 500. And what I mean by that is, if we have a family that had multiple students participating in the fall and would have exceeded the family cap, we would not go back and reimburse anything beyond 500, but they would not be charged anything moving forward, and then the 500 would be a hard cap from this point on. So we would not reimburse. A second model to consider is a tiered model. This is very similar to what they have in the Gahanna-Jefferson Public School District, where you have $200 for your first sport in high school, $100 for your second. The third sport is free. At middle school, it'd be half of that, which we consistently do. $100 for the first sport, $50 for the second sport, and your third sport is free. We also would like to maintain in this model a family cap of $500 effective the upcoming winter season, and again, for those same reasons, not retroactive back. And we would have 2 pieces not retroactive back, the $500 family cap, and we already had a full fall season where students have paid $240. So if students were to have their first sport in the winter, it would be $200 if this model was enacted, but we would not reimburse all the fall sports athletes for $40 over and above. This would be what we would do from this point forward, if that makes sense. We estimate that that would generate between $300,000 and $350,000. This is an approximation based upon the number of students, and I'll share that with you in a moment, the number of students who we know that participate in 2 sports or 3 sports. And at Westerville South, we had 1 student athlete participate in 4 sports. But we also we'd only make a very educated guess on the impact of the family cap, because that depends on the size of families coming up and the amount of participation that happens within that family. So we just made a very, very educated guess on an approximation. We think we're very, very close. So looking at last school year that we completed, and high school they're the numbers that we have the best information on. We've had a lot of turnover at the middle school AD position, and so we made some approximations that we think are very close based upon past trends and ratios. So at the number of students that participated in 1 sport, 1,167 last year, what that 46,680 reduction means is if we stayed with our current model and 1,167 students paid the full $240 versus the tiered model where they would only pay $200, the difference of them paying $240 or paying $200 in the tier model would be a reduction of $46,000 by accepting, and that would be an impact to the district, that the district would further support the athletic programs. Same concept and logic for the 343 student athletes last year that participated in 2 sports who would pay an additional $240. Well, that group would now only pay $100, so that's the difference of them paying $240 or only $100, and the 33 students plus the 1 4-sport athlete from Westerville South last year, that wouldn't pay at all because that would be their 3rd sport. That would be the difference of them paying $240 in our current model to not paying anything as a 3rd and 4th sport athlete. in the tiered model. So the ultimate impact to the general fund would be, for high school, $102,000 approximately. And with middle school, we looked at the ratios of the collections that we typically have in trend data and the number of students that typically play multiple sports, and we have a rough figure of about a $40,000 impact at the middle school level. They don't have the same number of athletes, the same number of sports that they do at the high school. And I have in parentheses just the family cap, because we can only guess what that impact would be given the size and nature of participation for our families.
I think one of the interesting pieces on this is the decline in the numbers of students doing multiple sports. It almost seems to parallel the structure of every time I do a sport, it's 240. So the numbers, the reduction assumes that same level of participation. But if you have more students pick up a second sport or even a third sport, I mean, it just boggles my mind that we only have 33 high school kids doing 3 sports. That was like the norm when we were growing up, wasn't it? Right? And I don't know, maybe it's not anymore for kids, but it seems to me that part of the impact of the current financial structure we may be seeing in terms of these numbers. And the other one is, Scott, you and I looked a little bit today. I think it was the 10-11 school year. Those numbers, we had about 1,800 high school student athletes. And last year, we were about 1,500. So there's a 300 student difference in there, and I don't know where it's playing out, but might be part of the impact.
And this tier model, I think, encourages more students to participate in 2 and 3. And when you look at the spring sports, I've heard from multiple track coaches that have said their programs have almost been devastated as a result. And as a former track athlete myself, track is as much social as it is athletic, and the camaraderie with those out there, and students just aren't willing to pay $240 if that's not their main sport. So we're hoping that we can rejuvenate some of those programs in the spring as well.
I think, just real quick before you get off of that, I think there's a missed economic benefit in this model that's not mapped here.
Mm-hmm.
There's actually a net economic gain to the district for a 2-sport athlete, as opposed to one student selecting one sport or one family selecting one sport at 240. If they select a sport and another sport, that's 300.
Sure.
Right? So your net 60 ahead. Not that we're looking to monetize this, from that standpoint, but I would say that's another variability factor that we can't quite bake into the models. How many of the gap between 415 and 111, 300 students in Central, are going to elect a second sport because now it fits within the family's
Sure.
Economic capabilities, and now it's plus side,
Sure.
right?
Sure.
Now, probably offset by the family cap, but I think that there's just a lot of, there's a lot of potential room for unanswered questions. I think that this is conservative, which is good. We want to see it in conservative format, but I don't know it will necessarily play out that conservatively. I think it looks pretty good for the district.
And then finally, an option that's always one that the board can consider would be to revert to our pre-levy structure, again, effective winter 2015, not retroactive as we have explained in the previous models. And as a reminder, our former model was $100 per sport at the high school level. At the middle school, it was $150 per sport. We did not, in our former model, have any reductions for economically disadvantaged families, as some districts have done. We did not have any family caps as well. And in the last full year, FY11, this generated $262,000 in pay-to-participation fees for the district. So in looking at all of these things and aligning with our philosophy of trying to engage more students that where you belong and creating incentives for more students to be involved in our athletics, in our extracurriculars, and our co-curriculars, our recommendation would be to suspend the current model, effective at the end of this fall sport, and adopt and implement the tiered model to be annually reviewed by the board to see the impact that we've had and to see if our numbers have gone up and where we stand financially as a district. And if you look at a comparison, the FY15, which was last school year, our current pay-to-participation model again, you can see where we collected 18.1 for clubs and what we collected for co-curricular and theater and athletics in the class fee. And then looking ahead to next school year, because this school year would be a transition year where we would continue to collect some for theater, some for co-curricular and those things. So going into full implementation, if the board were to accept this model, we wouldn't collect anything for clubs and hopefully encourage more students to be a part of that. The same with co-curricular and theaters. In our model, we estimate a collection of anywhere from $350,000 to $400,000 as opposed to the nearly $600,000 that we collect now. And one item that we didn't touch was the class fee, which is $15 for high school and $5 for middle school. We had that fee prior to the levy. We did not touch that fee. That also supports $52,000 and $700 depending on enrollment. And at the high school level, that helps support the classes in terms of proms and future reunions and things like that. That helps bolster the accounts of those classes. So the total amount of collection last year was $690,000. Under the model that we are proposing, it would be from $400,000 to $450,000, which would have an impact of $240,000 to $290,000 conservatively that the board would support in our extra and co-curricular programs.
One clarification. We opted for the word suspend. You have a model in place today that was put in place a number of years ago that generates the revenue. What we're suggesting is that we give ourselves some breathing room, give our families some breathing room while economics for this district seem to be pretty good. Let's suspend that model for the time period, move to this model, evaluate it annually to see what it's doing. Are we really generating what we thought we were generating? Maybe it gets better than we thought. As Mr. Byrd pointed out, it's possible that it generates more revenue than we thought. We get close to that number. What do our economics do, which change every 2 years depending on the state's budget and other things? That puts the board in a position, this board and any future boards in the position that if it's not fitting our needs, we just revert back to the old model through board action. So that's our proposal. So we'll take any questions or comments along the way.
So, not any questions. Strongly support the tiered model. The only thing that I want to make sure that we're very specific on is I want the board burdened with written policy for annual evaluation. So I don't think that policy exists specifically today. We would have to bring that forward and have it added, right?
I'm not sure, yeah, I believe we don't have, actually what we do now is annually you review fees for everything, and these fees are included in there. You usually do that in March, but that's a review of the fees. If you want a review of the economic impact, that's a different thing. We can do that.
Yeah, I'd be much more comfortable with us being very specific, because this puts the obligation and responsibility on us to manage this, as opposed to how these decisions had to be made, right? We need to be looking at this from an economic impact standpoint, and I'd be much more comfortable if we're very precise about it in policy.
So the tiered model, which the concept of tiering is what I am most in favor of at this point in time. I'm concerned, though, because the cost that we've identified in our tiered model suggestion is at the high end for the averages, the very high end. That concerns me. And I'm also wondering, in my scribbling, I may have missed it when it was on there, what is the economic disadvantagement assistance for the tiered model?
We did not place that, but we knew that the board may consider that, and we could factor that in if the board wanted to make any adjustments. And again, this is a baseline for the board to have discussion. The board certainly can say, we want to bring that down even more, and the board can say, and we want to take consideration for students who are identified as economically disadvantaged. We certainly can work that in.
One thought on the economically disadvantaged, Dr. Nestor Baker, would be rather than apply it to each individual cost of the sport is to apply it to the family cap. Instead of a $500 family cap for economically disadvantaged families, you could take that family cap down to another number And that way, it's a little bit simpler to implement, which may or may not be your wish, but rather than saying for each sport, it's this.
Did you look at lesser costs on the tiers? Did you give consideration to, say, even 150 for the first sport, high school,
We didn't, but we can plug in,
5 for second, middle school, 75, 40, something like that?
we did not, but I think if you go back to, Scott, the chart with the 1, 2, and 3 sport athletes, you can take those numbers, the 1167
Yeah.
for high school, and if you said rather than 200, make it this, we can project out the revenue in any one of those. And what we found in middle school, where we don't have the numbers for participation in middle school, what we found over the years is that the difference between high school and middle school is roughly, middle school ends up being about 40% of what high school is in terms of changes. So you can quickly do some math and come to another number.
Thanks.
I do like the fact that, thinking of suspending the charges for a course that they receive a grade for, like the orchestra and the band. That's somewhat bothered me for a long time because that's a pretty hard fee that they have to pay to be a part of that, and yet they receive a grade for it. So I like that, suspending that part, as well as the club fees don't seem to be, any problem either. I don't think. We don't have that many. How many did you say we had in club fees? There were
33 clubs.
33 that
And it only
33?
generates about 18,000.
Yeah, what, 18,000 or something? Yeah. So, I would support your suggestion of suspending it and then taking a look at it another year, making sure that, and taking a look at even trying the family cap that's suggested, and see how it goes, see what happens with our participation, both with the band, the orchestra, and as well as clubs. I don't know what the membership in these different clubs are in terms of, enrollment, but maybe that will increase too. So, I would support the suspension, again, keeping in mind to take a serious look at it again next year.
Did you say anything about athletics?
Yeah, I like the tiered suggestion that was given, the 500 max for the family cap, but that would mean the first one would be, what, 200? And then 100
Under this proposal.
under the proposal that you have, yeah. I like that. I think that we should try it just to see what happens. That's certainly a little help for the families.
I just made 3 notes, and the one note was right before Dr. Kellogg spoke up, I made a note to myself, why is there such a drop from one sport, three sport to one sport? That's rhetorical and could be answered, could not be, we don't know. I think Richard exactly right, that if there's an increase in sports, then increase in revenue, we're not trying to make money off of it, but it certainly would offset some of the costs. I really appreciated your comment. I know it was just kind of a sidebar comment, but there are some sports that are not just about developing muscles, but they're really developing some socialization and some encouragement. And I've said this before, there are some kids in sports that the reason they are staying in school is because they're hanging in with this one sport, and that's keeping them in there. The other notation I made to myself, actually, Nancy, was exactly that. I wonder if we could just at least look at perhaps even a reduction of those first sport, second sport, third sport. Just, I don't know that I have a dollar in mind. It was a 200, 100, 0, 150, 0, right? High, middle. I don't know if you want to, did you do some quick math and you want to propose something, but I think I'm saying I'd like to at least look at that option the prior note, and then I'll let you, the main note was, I just really want to reduce some of the burden on some of the families. And if we can figure out a way to do that in this tiered model, and it will do that in this tiered model, wherever the final numbers come out, I'm very excited to say to the community and to say to the school community, you have been supporting us. It is tremendous. And now we believe we can make a difference in some lives of families.
How much are we reducing it already? Are we not on the family cap?
No, we have no cap currently. We have no,
The proposed one I'm talking about, the proposed
the
one.
proposed one.
Yeah.
The number that we've put out is 500. There are
Yes.
3 school districts that have a family cap, 2 have 500, 1 has 300. That's the
But the 200 that we charge for the first sport that we're proposing is, what is it currently?
240.
Okay, so we are dropping it somewhat, even in the
Yes.
proposal that you've presented?
Yes.
Yes, okay, I thought so.
Yes.
A quick difference between 200 for the first sport and 150 is a difference based on the numbers we had from last year, 1,167. The difference is $58,350. If you left the second sport still at 100, that's what your revenue difference would be. So if you went 150, 100,
Right.
you'd be giving up another 58,000. Now,
That's
you
for
mi-
high school, and how much then does it drop? What was the total you said, 58?
Take 58,000 and take about another 40% of that for middle school, and you got about
Thank
the
you.
same number.
Thank you.
So, yeah.
So,
I'm sorry. Go ahead, do you want to?
Yeah, I just wanted to say I'm in favor of the tiered model. Very much, the club fees and the co-curricular fees, I like the idea of suspending those and not having them pay any. I'm with Nancy, though. I would like to see the amount, and I don't know why, but I was thinking 150 also for,
And we actually did not talk about it.
no, yeah, for high school. I hear a lot about the burden to families, and I would even be in favor of making the family cap like 300, as you suggested. I think our goal always should be to save money, but we need to have access for our kiddos. And it looks to me like we may have more access if we lowered our numbers. So,
Yeah, and as I've kind of settled in my thinking here around where these are, when we drop from 240 to 200 on that first sport, that is a minimal drop, which actually in itself is not an encouragement. Even if you know that the next sport's going to be 100,
Sure.
that's still not an encouragement, especially if you're not a 2-sport kid.
right.
So I have some concerns about that. I would prefer to see it lower. As I look at where the district was prior to the cuts, prior to that 2012 change, that high school, what was that, $100 per
100.
sport? Middle school, 50 per sport, no economic disadvantagement criteria, no family caps. I am looking for something between that and the tiered model. So I am looking around, that 150 on the first sport, and then, 100, we could drop to 100, keep it at 100 for the second, third free, and then middle school, a concurrent drop as well. I hear a lot from families who are struggling, and then I also hear from people who say, well, why should I pay for your kid to be in band? And that's not an argument that I particularly support. As, Rick was saying, some kids stay in school because of sports. Some kids thrive because of their extracurricular participation. It is one of those long-term benefit things. You could also say, why should I pay for your kid to have advanced English courses? They've got what they need to write a letter and give me a call on the phone. It's a function of what makes the well-rounded citizen, which then evolves into greater capacity to be productive in society, which evolves into a greater capacity for a better community. And then if we want to be shorter term, kids who participate in extracurriculars are more likely to do better socially to stay out of trouble, to stay out of the juvenile justice system. You know, it has benefit. It has benefit to every taxpayer. It has, at this point in time, burden for our families, massive burden, and I think it thwarts the development of the competencies that children need to become active, productive citizens.
Let me add one real quick thing, and I just because I want it on the record. We know that sometimes it's theater that keeps a kid in school, too. It's not just athletics. We know that. We're just focusing on this. Sometimes it's music. So as soon as I caught myself saying that, yeah, I just want it very clear that I know that there are kids that are in school because that theater department is helping them shine. And that's like awesome. And music as well. So just thought I'd put that out there.
Well, I'm going to piggyback on that, because I've had a lot of time to think about this, and I'm actually relatively agnostic to what the exact dollar figure is. All right, I think that we're in agreement that the dollar figure needs to be less, tiering needs to be a part of the equation, economic disadvantage needs to be part of the conversation. I think we're all there, but there is a huge piece that has been missing from this discussion since we started this topic, and actually for the last couple of years. If we look at the last 100 years in this school district, there are 50 successive boards, at least, who have made a decision to make substantial capital investment in all of the infrastructure for sports, for theater, for band. You know, I get a lot of conversations that are coming back saying families are having to pay for X, students are having to pay for Y. I absolutely agree that it is a burden on families, but that is not even remotely close to the cost of these programs. Right? If we take the supplemental contracts out, if we take all of these different parts out, we have built a district that is expected by prior boards as well as ourselves to be operating athletically at a Div 1 level, theatrically at multiple complex productions. Musically, we have capacity to have marching bands that are double the size of the marching bands that we currently have. I'm not making that number up. I know that it's a fact because Westerville North and Westerville South used to have marching bands that were 2 times the size of their current population today. We have the capacity. So one thing that's been missing in this discussion is stewardship. If we built it and we are not utilizing it, are we being responsible and accountable to what the taxpayers, not just today, but historically in this district, have expected out of this district? And I think the answer to that is no. So I think part of this discussion has kind of gone around the edges of a very important piece of this, which is maximum participation is good stewardship for the assets that we've built as a district over the last century. So we should be doing that.
That's a really good point, Richard.
So would you like some direction from us, or do you feel like you have some direction? I feel like you've heard lots of things up here, so I think we're all saying we're in favor of the tiered model.
Sure.
But I think when it comes down to the financial part for athletics at the end, it sounds to me, I'm looking for agreement, that we're okay with lowering the number a little bit further for pay-to-participate fees?
I have notes that go like high school 150, 100, and 0, middle school 75, 50, and 0, and I heard family cap 300. That's conversation I captured in numbers.
And I think we're also saying suspend, and so that annually we would look at this.
Suspend with annual review, board policy, administrative guidelines to put the structure in place to make sure that happens.
Can we, as part of the examination, not can we, will we, survey? I want more information from parents and students as regards why they may or may not be participating. You know, we are making some assumptions around participation that we don't exactly have the information to support. I think we're accurate, but I don't know that. So I think it would be helpful, not just as we look at pay-to-participate fees, but it would also be helpful to us as we structure a program going forward as to what families and students believe about their participation.
I agree. One of the areas that I sometimes wonder is who's making the decisions about the kind of clubs and activities we offer. What the kids want to do and what the adults want to lead sometimes aren't always congruent. That's at least in my house. The other piece that's not represented in here, which I think in that conversation should be included, would be any of our community-based clubs and organizations. We have volleyball programs, lacrosse programs, hockey programs, crew programs where kids are participating, and those numbers and conversations are absent from this, which would be of interest to us. And what our relationship with those organizations are, and what do we want them to be. I'm a big believer in I want to embrace those organizations and give them as much support as possible. Doesn't mean dollars, it may mean other things, and how we view those kids and those programs. So I think that's an important piece. So I did put participation survey, I think, to be a good part of our social emotional learning dimension.
And I will share that and like to think I was able to get out, and I did not do a formal survey like you suggested, but I talked to a lot of parents, a lot of coaches, booster members, band directors. So there were a lot of opinions that I solicited to help formulate some of these models.
Is there anyone here tonight from a booster organization or someone that would like to speak to us? Sure. Okay.
Thank you. Good evening. My name is Rob Rothney. I am the president of Westerville Central Athletic Boosters. I'm here on behalf of very interested parties in all of our sports. I'm very excited about the proposals that you've made, particularly for our disadvantaged kids. We're having a great football season, as you know, and there's a lot of kids that, to the points that have been made, are in those sports and stay in school because of those sports. We see it on a regular basis, that if they weren't playing football, if they weren't playing soccer, they'd be out doing something else, and not something else that might not be very good, or spending their time. As a booster board, through our efforts, we raise money through concessions and our fundraisers to support pay-to-play. We allocate $20,000 per year for each athlete. It's $25 per over 800 athletes. That's our goal every year, and we have been able to meet and exceed that goal every year. To have a reduction in pay-to-play would be significant, and I would follow the proposal for the tiered of 50, 100, 75, 0, and then cap at 300. That would bring tears to parents' eyes. It would, really. There's a lot of folks that, that's what they do for a community. I mean, we come together on a Friday night lights. I mean, we just played North. The stands were full. The concession cash register was ringing. And we're able to, if we have a good night, that goes to our kids. Besides that money, we raise almost $50,000 per year. We pay $20,000 to pay to play. We pay each one of those sports for participation fees, and then we have 4 scholarships that we support out of those funds. So, I would wholeheartedly support an adjustment to a tiered level. My question tonight, it was running through my mind, what happens to the $584,000? If we reduce that, it becomes $300,000, $350,000. What's that difference going to mean? I mean, are the individual schools, high schools and middle schools running that, or where does that money go, and what happens to that when it would ratchet down to the 3?
This wouldn't impact the current athletic budgets at all. This would be general fund. The athletic budgets today are immune from pay to participate because they don't get any of that money. Under the previous model, before the levy in the current model, they got a percentage of the pay to participation fee that every kid paid. That went back into their bank account. They don't get that anymore. And they're also responsible for transportation. So this wouldn't impact them at all. This would be just out of general fund.
Well, you have my support, and we've got our booster meeting Wednesday night. There'll be a lot of thrilled people to see that we're even talking about this. So, thanks very much.
Thanks, Mr. Rothney.
And I'd just like to add, that's something that's kind of been missed, and Richard, you talked about or Mr. Byrd, excuse me, some different angles that we've looked at. This collection of pay-to-participation fee was really solely to purchase down supplemental contracts for our coaches and their assistants. And we have a lot of boosters that collect a lot of money to support our programs in other ways. And to think that a booster organization might have $25,000 that they may not need to support families, because we have taken care of families and can do that to support kids in a direct way through scholarships, through maybe some equipment or different activities for the kids. So I think that's a residual thing that we haven't hit on either.
Okay.
One other piece of data you might find interesting. So I did a poll. This is from 2014. This is EMIS report on some school districts, and I polled comparables. I used Hilliard because of size and demographics. I used Olentangy and Worthington because of location. So to give you the, I know these numbers sometimes get really out there. So here's some percentages. In 2014, Westerville, the total percentage of our general fund expenditures for extracurricular activities related to academic-oriented activities, these are the 4100s, accounted for 0.09% of the money we spent that year, 0.09%, right? 0.09%, which is what that's that top piece, right? The athletic side, when you put personnel services, the 100s, the 200s, employee retirement, and purchase services together, they accounted for less than 1%. In Hilliard, I'll just take the 100s. This is the contracts. This is absent the employee retirements, purchase services. I'm just not going to do that math real quick. They were 0.92%. Olentangy was 0.88%. We were 0.67%. Worthington was 0.67%. And again, so compared to, so what you have is, this is what Mr. Byrd was alluding to, you're investing in these programs at a rate similar to other districts, which would imply opportunities for kids are similar to other districts. But on the other side of that, the cost for people to access that opportunity is higher when you look at OCC schools. And I think if you compare it to those schools, you'd find that our pay-to-participate fees are higher. So to get the same access, you have to pay more. And the other side of it is, I know the numbers those are big numbers, and I don't mean to demean that, but I'm also looking at percentages of what we spend, and I'm going, okay, let's keep it in context of everything else we do. So, and I think as you'll see in the coming 5-year forecast, you can go back to the previous 5-year forecast, and when you see next 5-year forecast, I don't think there's any reason to believe that suspending the current structure, as Mr. Reeves has suggested, even at the rates that I've heard some board members suggest, isn't something we can't afford to do. And you leave yourself the opportunity through an annual review to reinstate the previous model at any point that you think economically that's what we need to do. So it gives this board that latitude and future boards that latitude. And I think it, I hear $20,000 of pay-to-participate fees for Westerville City, for Westerville Central athletes, and I think about, that's a lot of uniforms, it's a lot of fees, it's a lot of helmets. There's a lot of opportunities for kids that could be different than what we're doing. A lot of cross-country uniforms, being the guy I am, right? So I'm pleased that the board's responded so favorably. In terms of what we need, and I think one way to go about this would be if the board wants to take some action and give us direction, and we'll put it in place.
So you guys willing to pass a resolution tonight?
Once again, I just want to reiterate that obviously this would be a suspension for 1 year, and that the board would look at this annually, because I know we used to say, and Bart and I used to talk about this, that our fees covered at least 50% of our
Supplementals.
Supplementals, yes, and that was, and they go up every year. Supplementals is something that we'll need to just keep in mind in terms of our cost, and I like the idea of re-looking at it annually. So, I could go for that.
Okay? Yes? Okay, so help me fumble through this. So we're going to make a resolution to suspend. I was just going to walk through it first. To suspend the current fee schedule. We're going to go with the tiered model, okay? The club fees would be 0, the co-curricular fees would be 0, and then we were setting up the pay-to-participate fees for high school, starting at $150 for the first sport. The second sport would be $75, and the third would be free. And then middle school would be $100, $50, and free. Is that where we're all at?
So we're not going to change middle school?
I
Yeah,
thought
that
you
was-
changed middle school.
I said,
You
Middle
kept it
school.
the same from-
I'm sorry.
150 and free.
What,
No.
150, 100 free, 75, 50 free?
I actually heard 150, 75,
Okay.
0 for high school.
high school.
And I
then-
heard 75,
Yes.
50,
Yes,
0 for middle school.
Yeah.
Right.
That's what I heard.
75, 50, 0.
I don't know, we're making a big step there.
And
The-
I tell
the
you, one of the
current
reasons I'm
proposal
so
is
much in favor
one,
of that is because it's a
Then
feeder
50
system
and
and we've
0.
lost our
We're
feeding.
talking about 75.
75, 50,
Zero.
yeah, that's why I wanted to run,
What do you mean?
yes. Is that where we're,
Yes. Middle school, 75, 50, 0. Right?
Yes, that's what I was thinking.
75, 50, 0, middle school, 150, 75, 0, high school.
yes.
Yes. And the cap at, did cap at 3? So we're
So
thinking,
we,
3, do I hear?
cap at 3?
3,
Or 3 going once?
okay, so any,
You want policy related to this regarding annual review, participation survey of students, and presentation of that data as well. That's the other 2 elements I heard.
yes.
Now, wait a minute.
Disadvantagement. What's up in the air around economic
I was
disadvantage?
just going to ask that. I don't know that we've addressed that, have we?
We've talked broadly about it.
150
thinking?
and 75, what are we saying for
High
this high
school.
school?
For high school,
High
150,
school, 150, 75, and third free.
So why are we saying cap at 300? We're actually capping it less than that.
well,
Family
for
cap.
family cap.
If-
For a
if-
family.
Oh.
Kids,
So family cap at 300.
2 or 3 kids in a family playing a sport, so capping the family.
Basically, yeah, the second kid doesn't pay much, okay.
Yeah, so the only
Do
children.
we
If they
want to do
agree,
this
yeah.
tonight, or do we want to wait so it's all written out and we don't goof up?
I'm okay, I'm okay with waiting, writing it up,
Yeah. I
just
think-
making it very clear, and then moving forward at our next meeting, when it's a couple
And
weeks,
then-
right?
Yeah, let's do that, and I
Yeah.
think it's pretty clear what our intention is, but just to make sure there's no slip in the, in the
Right.
writing of it, and that all the components are there, I think it's really clear what we want, so if we could have that,
Right.
we'll just move that through fairly
And
quickly
that'll-
next time.
Give us a little time for
Before
feedback,
the
too.
meeting, too, yeah, at least a few days before the meeting.
We'll frame it and have it as part of a Friday update.
Right.
Yes.
And I would ask, just for clarification, I am looking for us to differentiate. I want to see a policy differentiation between school fees and play-to-participate fees. And I think that's the big policy message here, is that the economic assessment of play-to-participate fees is independent of school fees. The reason that I feel that way is, like you said, we did the analysis without including class fees already. We're already making that differentiation. That's what I'd like to see articulated in policy.
And I'd also like to do this in a couple of weeks because, or our next meeting, because this will give opportunity for the public to give us more feedback, too.
Sure.
And I don't think, and hopefully this will get published somewhere so that people, the taxpayer can see what's going on and what we're proposing.
Well, remember, there are
Give us
thousands of people that
feedback.
watch these meetings.
Oh, absolutely, I know
It's
that.
riveting.
This is on the internet around the world right
We're
now.
covered tonight, I'm sure, yes.
Tens of. That's a good point. I don't mean, sorry, I shouldn't joke about that. Absolutely. Wait a couple weeks, get some feedback, and move forward.
Absolutely,
That's
yes.
great.
And I would also keep in mind that the co-curricular and clubs would be for the next school year because so many
Right.
have already
Correct.
paid.
Right,
Yes, except
Athletics, we
theater.
can do effective
Right.
immediately, but not go in
right.
arrears.
Right.
Right. I mean,
Except for theater. which-
Immediately meaning the beginning of winter sports.
and even if we do what you've proposed tonight, that's a help to families. So, I think that, we need feedback. We need an opportunity for people to give us feedback. Thank you.
I do appreciate, by the way, bringing this forward so quickly and getting back to us at this meeting as we requested without any delays. Moved that forward, got that information for us. That was very, very helpful. Thank you. It's part of kind of the general get things back in balance plan that you see us operating from. And this is the athletics and all the other extracurriculars, this is a piece that has been seriously out of balance, and this is one step from moving that back into balance.
And my only concern with all this and is that, we can keep it in balance. As our expenses go up annually, we have to be able to maintain these cuts and supports that we're providing for the taxpayer, and we want to be able to do that. But if we move too fast, this may be too much. So that's my biggest concern, I think. that
And I really-
Once we make a balance, we'd like to keep it that way,
Yeah, and Dr. French, I think you're right. I'd love to hear from the community. And just the very built-into policy review, I think is a great idea. Rob, I have forgotten your last name. Roth. If you, and to anyone watching, if you could spread the word to organizations, other schools, and we'd love to get some feedback on this idea. Just send it out there. Yeah, let us know. That's really, thank you. Thank you.
And I think the timing of this is good because we can get this done prior to the start of winter
Yes.
sports and have immediate help. I would also, looking at the timeline of when we do things, as we look annually at these fees, I would say late June, early July would be a good time to do that because that's when we wrap up the school year and we see what the impact as we close the books for the year. So that would give us a really good picture moving into the next school year, that time frame. Anytime prior to that, we wouldn't have finished the year to know what the impact would be.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Reeves. Appreciate it.